place to be. What's going on? It's me. You remember Wrestling with Regret? Of course you do. I've just uploaded a bunch of their videos, a reaction to their videos via my channel. We're going to watch one more. Like Wrestling with Regret. This is the top 8 worst things about the Attitude Era. Starting right now. I like the Attitude Era. I'm sure it had its problems. I know it had its problems. I know it did. I know it did. So we're going to watch top 8 worst things. He likes the number 8.
It goes without saying that if it were not for the Attitude Era, the WWF may very well have lost the Monday Night Wars.
Yeah.
If it weren't for the wild and crazy booking in the late 1990s, the company would have likely never recovered from its tailspin as it fought against WCW.
Yeah.
There were some other factors as well, like the immense popularity of guys like Steve Austin, The Rock, and Mick Foley, but a lot of what fans remember most fondly about this time period was the outrageous gimmicks and storylines that filled up the rest of the card. The fact that it was such a successful era has left many fans to pine for a return to that style of booking. Those who despise the PG product of today's WWE harken back to the good old days when women would show off their boobs and people would yell "suck it" all the livelong day. But what a lot of fans with their rose-tinted glasses seem to forget is that for all the good things the Attitude Era gave us, there was also a lot of despicable crap that fans had to wade through as well.
Yeah.
And this week on Wrestling with Regret, I'm going to rank them the top 8 worst things about the Attitude Era.
Let's see what he's got to say about this. As I put on my cap.
Number 8. Ministry Undertaker.
Yeah.
I briefly touched on my disdain for Ministry Undertaker all the way back in my review on religious gimmicks. But to me, what made this character stand out in my mind as something wholly awful is that in the sea of outlandish gimmicks at the time, this was by far the most outlandish, almost to the point of parody. The Ministry of Darkness was initially an interesting concept that a lot of moody teens like me could get behind, but drinking blood? Crucifixions? Power powers?
We have to prepare for the eventual arrival of our power.
Nearly every other gimmick going on at the time was at least somewhat based in reality or based on that person's actual personality. But The Undertaker as an over-the-top satanic cult leader was just too much. But it's not like his character ever got better as we moved away from the Attitude Era. Ooh, magical powers, spooky, spooky.
He always had that. He always had that before. My problem with Ministry Undertaker is that his matches sucked in. Yes.
In what can only be considered a response to the percolating popularity of Ultimate Fighting at the time, the WWF came up with the Brawl for All, a boxing tournament pitting some of the company's lower card wrestlers looking to get some airtime. And the best part of it was...
And it was gonna be a shoot!
Every week on Raw during the summer of 1998, 15 minutes of valuable airtime were taken up by this abomination. The fights were bland and boring. Fighters got blown up 1 minute in because they weren't conditioned for boxing, and almost everyone who took part in it suffered some sort of injury. The tournament was really made to create one star, Dr. Death Steve Williams. Word is he was supposed to win the tournament and get a push up the card, but when he was injured during a fight, lower mid-carder Bart Gunn wound up winning the whole thing. Then he was richly rewarded by barely being used for the rest of the year. He wasn't seen again until WrestleMania 15, when, well, you know. Beyond the objective level of it being boring as hell, our old friend Jim Cornette has quite possibly the best explanation for why the Brawl for All was so bad.
The stupidest idea that has ever made air in the WWF led to injuries on the talent roster, led to bad feelings amongst the boys who were actually going in there beating each other up. The fans didn't care. Nobody believed it was a shoot anyway. They killed Dr. Death's WWF career, and they cost themselves millions of dollars with that one fight because they were fucking stupid.
He's Jim Cornette, and that's his opinion.
Thank you, fuck you, bye.
Yeah, Brawl for All was terrible. It was awful.
The rise of backyard wrestling. If there's one thing the Attitude Era can consider its lasting legacy, it's the deluge of backyard shows across the country, headlined by Dean in cargo pants and Goober the face paint wearing redneck. These are the people who are keeping Hot Topic in business. Now, granted, backyard wrestling has always been around to some extent. After all, the NWF was around in the 80s. It was backyard before backyard was cool.
Yeah.
But it seems as though today's backyard
in his backyard.
is a time capsule of the worst of the WWF at the time. Just crass violence with no backstory.
Somewhat responsible. Come on. ECW was much more responsible than WWF was for this. The shit that these kids were doing in these backyards had nothing. More to do with ECW's product than
There are a
WWF.
minority of guys who eventually grow out of the backyard phase and go on to train to become legitimate wrestlers.
Although I backyard wrestled, but I didn't do it with weapons. We did it on grass, and we were safe with each other.
Number 5. Sable. A lot of people waited for Sable to become a success in the WWF, but at least Sunny had a personality to go with her looks. Sable?
And looked much better.
It boggles the mind how this
really
woman was
did.
placed on the forefront of everything WWF at the time, the alpha female of the company.
Sable looked
Here's
trashy
a woman
as
whose only
shit.
redeeming quality was her appearance, but put her in front of a microphone and she's about as exciting as a root canal.
Let me tell you, the Sable bomb will be dropped on Jacqueline here tonight.
Sable had zero charisma, minimal wrestling skills, and from all accounts, a horrid personality backstage. If you look at women's wrestling over the last 15 years, how much of an impact has Sable really left? Her chief rivals, Luna and Jacqueline, even others like Ivory, Lita, and Chyna, have influenced far more women than Sable ever.
Because they were better in all aspects.
Bland was still a lot more interesting than Sable, especially when Sable was a heel.
Not now, Michael. Once I get started, I can't stop.
Well, don't let me stop you.
She couldn't wrestle, she couldn't talk, and it turns out she couldn't even dance. So why was she given such a bright spotlight?
That's a good question.
Number 4.
I was not into Sable all that much. I really wasn't. I was more into Sunny. He looks better.
Before there was the infamous Triple H Katie Vick scene, there was another also gross moment that took place during the Attitude Era. Sexual chocolate Mark Henry was harassing Chyna, and her way of getting back at him was by recruiting a transvestite to mac on him. Because everyone knows the only way to get back at someone for aggressively pursuing a masculine-looking woman is to give him a feminine-looking man. What follows are the 7 worst words on television since George Carlin's classic bit.
Oh, sweet Jesus! What's he gonna beat us?
Like, you couldn't tell just by looking at him.
Now let me be clear here, I'm not saying that this is gross because Sammy is a man in drag. No, I'm saying this is gross because Sammy, the man in drag, is the punchline. It's just sort of an, oh look, Mark is fondling a man. Isn't that so embarrassing for Mark? It's really awful and juvenile. It perpetrates the negative stereotype that transsexuals and homosexuals are out to trick straight people. But really my issues with
In 98?
and aforementioned issues with Sable are part of a much
/ 99
larger problem with the Attitude Era.
Versus
Number
in
3.
2015, looking at it in 2015 glasses versus 99 glasses,
All the
slightly
sexism.
different.
This period of time for the World Wrestling Federation might as well have been called the Boobitude Era, because everyone knows that even above all the ultra-violence, it was the TNA that was defining the company at the time. And I'm not talking about this or this. It's true that sex sells, and the WWF exploited that fact to the nth degree. They may have been catered to the teens and young adult males at the time, but everyone knows that little kids were watching just as much as they had before or since. I don't mean to sound like a stick in the mud, but I sure as hell wouldn't want my kids seeing this sort of thing. In this era, the biggest insult you could lobby against a woman was to rip her clothes off or write skank on her face with lipstick. And it wasn't just the physical aspect of it, it was the verbal stuff as well. Consider Sable's main storyline in '98 with Jacqueline. Here's just some of the fabulous mic work these two possessed.
This body is primo real estate. How many times have you rented it out?
Well,
Yeah, neither one of them were great on the mic.
You ain't nothing but a tramp.
Jacqueline was a hell of a worker, but she was terrible on the mic.
And let's not forget Jerry Lawler at his sleaziest on commentary. Let's review some choice quotes, shall we? Women, can't live with them? No resale value. I can read it like a book, but I prefer the Braille edition. She's had more hands on her than a doorknob. I'm just going to be over here going blind. They may call me the bad but she has the double whoppers, puppies, and many more. But the real kicker to the systemic attitude toward women is the complete hypocrisy that took place in '99 when Jeff Jarrett and Chyna feuded over the Intercontinental Championship. See, Jarrett was on a war against all women, and the announcers correctly labeled him a misogynist jerk. When Chyna eventually beat Jarrett, it was considered a victory for womankind everywhere, as the other women in the company were still being called sluts and hoes. Mixed messages! Women back then were cheered if they A. had big boobs, B. showed their big boobs, C. were strong and independent, or D. boobs, boobs, boobs. If a lady were considered unattractive, like Nicole Bass or Chyna before her surgery, or that large lady who was involved in the Kiss My Ass match at SummerSlam '99. She would be mocked.
I don't know why they consider Chyna attractive before her or after her surgery.
It's the only reason BV ever got screen time. What kind of message was this sending to the young boys and young girls watching this stuff? Today's divas may have no character, personality, or unique qualities, but hey, at least not being treated like pieces of meat.
Yes, they are!
Number 2.
They're still out there in scantily-clad bullshit!
The death of Owen Hart. The only reason this is not number 1 is because I don't want this list to end on a downer. But Owen's death was quite possibly the greatest tragedy to happen in all of wrestling, much less the Attitude Era.
Yeah.
For it to have happened on such a large stage is one thing, but for it to have stemmed from such a silly, harmless thing as the blue blazer providing comic relief makes it even more tragic. You can debate until you're blue in the face as to whether or not they should have stopped a pay-per-view, but there's really no wrong or right answer.
No.
Not much else to say about this one. Owen was simply an amazing wrestling talent and personality, and he was taken from the world far too soon for such a silly, silly reason.
Yeah.
And the number 1 worst thing about the Attitude Era is impossibly high standards. Ever since the Attitude Era ended and the ratings went south, a lot of people have wondered what would it take for those ratings to get back into the highs again, those 8s and 7s that they used to be. Well, couldn't they just ditch the PG crap and go back to the raunchy stuff they did before? That worked in the past, right? What fools. First off, ratings will never reach the heights they did back in the late 90s and early 2000s, no matter how good the product is. Television was almost an entirely different medium back then.
Yeah.
There were far fewer channels on cable, DVRs didn't exist, the internet was not as widely available, and social media was unheard of. Second, simply cranking up the sex and violence isn't the answer either. Our society today is much more sensitive to that sort of content. You think parents in the media were up in arms back in '98? Try getting Val Venus and The Godfather over in 2014. Sure, today's products may come off as stale sometimes, and yeah, maybe a little blood now and then would help make storylines a little more compelling, but a mere philosophical change in booking isn't going to bring about another boom period for ratings. To fans of the Attitude Era, nothing will ever be good about wrestling again until the booking reverts back to that style of the late 90s. Even if there are good things happening in wrestling today, like if the quality of the matches improves, because believe me, wrestling today, quality of the match-wise, has gotten a lot better than it was back in the late 90s, believe me. Not only that, but even if there's that, or if there are storylines that are getting really cool that people can get behind, or some cool gimmicks, fans will ultimately scoff and say, well, it's not as good as the Attitude Era, or that gimmick wouldn't get over in the Attitude Era, and it just kills everyone else's buzz. It's this vicious cycle of negativity and ultra-high standards that just leads to more disappointment and more negativity. What will it take to make pro wrestling cool and mainstream again? Will WWE ever have a boom period that's measured not just in quarterly revenues, but in television ratings as well? I don't know if anyone really knows the answer to those questions. All I know is that the Attitude Era was a star that shone way too bright and created a legion of fans looking for something like it to return. I'm Brian Zane, and this has been Wrestling with Wregret.
Now, wait just 1 minute, Zane.
Wait, what? Hello? Who's that?
Yeah, I'm 14-year-old Brian Zane, and I got a bone to pick with you, man. The Attitude Era is like the best thing ever!
Okay, me from the past. Well, what do you have to go off of there?
Well, duh, I mean, come on, Stone Cold Steve Austin, he's the coolest, right? I love it when he beats people up and he gives people the finger if he doesn't like them. I mean, he's like an inspiration to me.
Oh, I know. That's why we would get suspended from school every once in a while, remember?
Oh, yeah, yeah, right. Well, it still doesn't change the fact that wrestling in the late 90s is totally awesome. I mean, come on, name me one WrestleMania after 15 that can top that awesomeness.
Literally all of them except for 25. I've made this perfectly clear. Look, shouldn't you be busy right now going on the internet looking up pictures of Sable from Fully Loaded 98?
Oh, good idea. Yeah, we just got a 56K modem in our house. That means it takes slightly fewer minutes to get the good stuff online. Oh, man, I can't wait. Ha-ha, boobies.
Yeah, go on. Go. Fine, whatever. I don't care. Well, I never said I didn't like Sable back then.
That was not the best Pimpin' Ain't Easy version, by the way. There was a version from the demo of Aggression that came out that was much better with Slick Rick and Dana Dane. I disagree with him on a few things, including the number one thing, which is why WWE will never come back to that level of popularity and coolness. It doesn't it doesn't really have to do with the sex and stuff like that. I do wish sometimes that it was more realistic, some of the storylines and stuff that they tell, but part of that is because there's no real competition. Vince McMahon excelled when he saw there was competition. In all the boom periods, when there was competition and people breathing down his neck and he thought that he had to succeed or die, is when the show got better. And as of now, there's nothing. They have nothing to compete with. Nothing. TNA's nowhere near at their level. Neither is Lucha Underground yet, although it could be. Neither is ROH. Neither is NWA anymore. That's been dead for 20 years. Like, they've got nothing. They've got no competition. There's nothing knocking them off the block. And until there is something knocking them off the block, like WCW was at the time, there's going to be nothing. There's going to be no reason for them to change course. There's going to be no reason for them to stop what they're doing. There's going to be no reason for something not to be stale, because now they're dealing with corporate shareholders. And the thing about corporate shareholders and the stock market and things of that nature is that the stock market hates change. It hates trying something new. It likes things to be... That's why whenever a new president comes in, the stock market takes a dip, because it's something new. Oh my God! They fucking hate that. So that's why WWE is staying the exact same, because now they're a stock market entity. And they need to stay exactly the same, or else they're going to lose... they're going to lose shareholders and stuff like that. So that's why it's the same. I disagreed on a couple of them, including, and I'm going to go back here, let's see, Sable. I disagree with Ministry Undertaker, because I think Ministry Undertaker sucked for different reasons than what he said. Let's see, the sexism. Yeah, although the Divas still aren't, you still got them shaking their asses and stuff like that. There are no more bra and panties matches, at least for the time being, because they're trying to be more girl friendly. But there was a lot of shit going on in the Attitude Era. So the sexism, yeah, but also here's the thing about sexism. Here's the real reason why the sexism was a problem, was because the talent of women, the level of talented women that they had during the Attitude Era, particularly the early parts when Sable was running everything, was not all that high. And the type of woman that they hired and showed them off as sexual objects there were a lot of the same kind of chick, and I wouldn't have considered them sexy. Like, I wouldn't have considered Jackie sexy. She's talented as fuck in the ring. She can work in the ring. I wouldn't have considered her necessarily sexy. I wouldn't have considered her great on the mic at all. Sable was terrible in all fucking aspects. Terry Runnels was nothing to write home about either. You know what I mean? The level of talent that they had in those women's matches for a long time, until Ivory and... I mean, Jacqueline had talent, and so did Luna, but how often the talent pool of women was super low, so... Plus, they worked down to Sable's level to try to help get her over. You know what I mean? Like, the level of talent didn't start getting better in the women's division until later. That's the problem with the sexism, in my opinion, from that standpoint. As far as impossibly high standards, in anything, you want to set higher standards. You want to set higher goals. And you want to try to reach and attain those goals. I think the problem is not that the goals are too high for WWE to reach ever again, is that the goals were high in the Attitude Era for a reason. They no longer have that reason, and they have every reason to be complacent. And that's the problem with the impossibly high standards, in my opinion, Brian Zane. What about your opinion, party people? Do you agree with me? Do you agree with him? Do you disagree with both of us? Do you agree with both of us on different aspects of it? Comment in Attitude Era style. Wait for it. Comment down there in the comment section. Like, share, subscribe. YouTube.com/Sharil469. Over to the right hand side, click the little blue button that says support. You'll be supporting. And if you ain't down with supporting, I got 2 words for you. Oh well. Boom. Boom. Boom.
Suplex City, bitch. Suplex City, bitch. Suplex City, bitch. Suplex City, bitch.